Good morning to you all. This is the latest tour from Liverpool Tours. My name is John Wiles. This is down to looking at the White Star Line today. I'm going to be talking about 30 James Street, a building that we all know in Liverpool. But I want to focus purely on the building itself today, not just about the White Star Line. But I do want to give some background information on the actual building itself, and also on a little bit of information about the White Star Line. Now, the White Star Line, for everybody who knows the White Star Line in Liverpool and the actual building, it's basically, for me, it's conjured up in one word, and that's the word Titanic. No other word in the 20th century will conjure up a greater story, a greater historical occurrence, or the greatest seafaring disaster in modern times. However, the Titanic never set sail in Liverpool, and this was partly due to bad weather on the 1st of April 1912. Instead, the Titanic set sail on the 2nd. The sea trials are completed and the ship will set sail for Southampton. Now, the official story goes is the fact that the Titanic was never destined for Liverpool at all. Because the Olympic was the first one to arrive and it was the full fanfare of the Olympic, the Titanic was never destined to set sail to Liverpool, and that's something I've researched heavily. So even though the actual trials were late, even though there's bad weather, Titanic was never destined to arrive at Liverpool. People always ask, why is the word Liverpool on the back of the Titanic? Well, the ship's managing company, the White Star Line, had its office in James Street, and this was the port of registry for the ship, hence the word Liverpool on the back of the ship itself. The White Star Line headquarters has held a varied and ill-fated history during its timeline. Once the headquarters for the White Star Line, it was heavily bombed in the Blitz in World War II and completely burnt out. Then used as offices before coming empty for many years. Now you can see on the map, I can give a 2D view and I can give a 3D view of James Street, and we're now circling the former White Star Line. Again, there's lots of information on White Star Line, which I can put on links as well at the bottom. And also you've got the Titanic disaster, which has been heavily talked about. There's lots of connections with Liverpool, and the Titanic just doesn't stop there. Captain Smith was based on Merseyside for 40 years before moving down to Southampton. The bass violinist for the ship's band lived in Tunstall Street off Smithdown Road. The great kitchens on the Titanic were made by Henry Wilson and Company. The Liverpool firm of Stoniers supplied 50,000 items of bone china to the ship. Chief Officer Wilde, no relation, was from Liverpool, and J. Bruce Ismay was also born and bred in Liverpool, who was the chairman of the White Star Line. So, brief history on the White Star Line. The earliest known reference to the White Star Line is from 1845, when it was founded in Liverpool by John Pilkington and Henry Wilson. Formed to focus on the UK-Australia trade, which greatly increased following the discovery of gold in Australia. On the 18th of January 1868, Thomas Ismay, a director of the National Line, purchased the White Star Line house flag, trade name and goodwill of the bankrupt company, previously bought on by heavy investment in shipping, which was financed by borrowing. Now we can have a look at Thomas Henry Ismay, also known as Backy Ismay. He used to chew tobacco quite a lot, and that was his name, or his nickname. The White Star Line began in Liverpool, and it began its Liverpool-New York run with the Oceanic class of ships, 6 in total: Oceanic, Atlantic, Baltic, Republic, Celtic and Adriatic. So you can have a look at the actual White Star Line. I want to bring into more about the building rather than the actual people who owned it and ran it. But you've got Thomas Henry Ismay. Now Thomas Henry Ismay he originally lived in Beach Lawn and then moved across to Doyle on the Wirral. Now I've colourised these photographs. These are photographs of Doyle, and this was a building constructed by R. Norman Shaw. You can see it there in all its glory. Absolutely fantastic building. Now, when you look at the actual White Star Line itself, and we're talking about the original building for the White Star Line. Henry Ismay wanted to move out of, they were originally in 10 Water Street and wanted to move headquarters, and so pleased with the actual information and the pictures and the actual design of Doyle with Richard Norman Shaw, he commissioned Richard Norman Shaw to construct 30 James Street and build it. Now, it's got loads of different names, 30 James Street. It has Albion House, 30 James Street, White Star Line Building, Pacific Steam Navigation Company. These are all names that people associate with 30 James Street. However, 30 James Street is its official name, with the above names being associated with the buildings at different times. 30 James Street was constructed between 1896 and 1898, designed by architects Richard Norman Shaw and James Francis Doyle. Now we can have a look at the very first image which was done for James Street. Let me just have a look for you now. And this is from The Builder in 1897. I'll just zoom in slightly. And when you look at the actual description, it says, designed by architects Richard Norman Shaw and James Francis Doyle. It was built for the Ismay, Imrie and Company shipping company, which later became the White Star Line. Its design follows closely to that of the architect's early work of 1887, the former New Scotland Yard building in London. And this building has been described by Historic England as a symmetrical design, 6 stories of varying heights and attics, 5 bays to James Street and 3 bays to the Strand, basement and ground level of ashlar with rusticated dressings, the upper stories brick banded with stone, round arched, concave entrance with keystones and rusticated columns, broken pediment with windows and an iron balcony at the top. Now, there's lots of rumours with regard to this building. I'm going to try and bring to light as many rumours as possible and what's been done and how it's been looked into, just to give an idea of what's been done, where the rumours started, what was original, what was not official, and just go through and talk about the actual information on the White Star Line. There's lots of information on the building. Now, when it was opened in 1898, it was called a slice of New Scotland Yard. And a slice of New Scotland Yard is the common criticism on the White Star Line offices. Like most common criticisms, it is partly true and partly false. There is undoubtedly a certain similarity between the two buildings. Same materials are used, the scale is the same, there are the same angled turrets, and there is somewhat similar treatment of the apex of the gables. But there are enough points of difference to entitle the Liverpool building to be regarded as a fresh and original design. Again, when you look at the early sort of pictures of the White Star Line, we have one in here which is more colourised. And it says the first point that strikes one externally, apart from the materials used, is its absolute simplicity. There is little or no carvings, no ornamental. It is essentially an architectural composition, the result of a skillful use of material and a clever scheme. As regards to the latter, it may be urged that the windows of the ground floor may be too large, and that consequently a weak appearance is given to the lower part of the building. If these windows had been fitted with plate glass, then there is no doubt this would have resulted, but broken up as they are now by small panes and the big sash bars, this defect is avoided. It goes to talk about in various pictures that some of these windows have also been spoilt by mahogany sun blind cases. It talks about Norman Shaw's work, but it doesn't mention James Francis Doyle. I'll come on to James Francis Doyle in a moment. And again, here, this series of little balconies, one to each window, with their charming curved fronts of wrought iron work, from one of the most pleasant features of the building, and prevent the appearance of flatness, which otherwise would have been problematic. It talks about the clock, and again we'll come to that in a moment on the actual clock. The clock is carried on an iron cantilever which has been cased in oak. It looked better, we think, before it was cased. We were hoping that Mr. Shaw, the architect, would have the courage to let the skeleton stand and decorate it with colour in gilding only. It also talks about the balcony at the top, and it also talks about the general arrangement of the building. Below the ground floor, which is raised 12 steps, there are 2 basements. The lower contain the heating apparatus, cool cellars, and is used for, we understand, for storing passengers' luggage. The upper basement and the ground floors are used by the White Star Line for their offices. The latrines are on the top floor but one, and the rest of this floor, and the one being used at the top, is for the caretakers' rooms. It is possible to get out on the open balcony in the apex of the gable, and from there is a glorious view of river and sea, of Cheshire and the Welsh hills in the background. The interior of the White Star Line offices on the ground floor is chiefly interesting from the frank way in which the construction is shown. The panelled fireproof ceiling, specially designed by the architects and made by J.E. Edwards of Raeburn, looks remarkably well. The uprights and girders will look equally well if they were not painted in such a strange colour. So what we're going to look at for the moment is the actual interior and the exterior. And again we go back to the builder, 1897, if I just zoom in slightly. And what is apparent to me from the start is that there are 2 entrances. One, the grand entrance on the right hand side, and the smaller entrance at the bottom of James Street. This is simply laid out in a picture. Now, when you look at sort of various buildings, like various ships like the Titanic, there was what you would call a class war. Now, if you were of first class and you wanted to purchase tickets for the White Star Line, you would enter the grand entrance and be given the grand hall and purchase tickets from the grand hall. However, if you were in the second cabins or steerage, you were only allowed to go in the smaller entrance and go through to the White Star Line offices below ground. And I think that's a real shame to happen. I think that the building was obviously built for class. You know, if you were going through the actual first class entrance, fantastic. But if you were just steerage, then unfortunately you wouldn't get to see the Grand Hall itself. Now there's lots of information and lots of images I've got, and I'll go through briefly of various images showing the different parts of the building. For me, one of the greatest parts is 1894. 1894, there was a warehouse on the site, and you can see St George's Church in the background. And this is taken from Man Island, and no one seems to know why this particular point or particular place for James Street was built. Why did Thomas Henry Ismay demolish the warehouses and put his building here? It's something I've not come across before. Again, from 1895, you can see a close-up of the warehouse before 30 James Street has been built. And again, 1896, taken from Man Island, you can just see on the right hand side the first parts of the building of 30 James Street with its crane, and you've just got St George's Church in the background. Now, what I love about the building is the fact that it's got so much presence on the corner of James Street. It really has. And yet, for many years it was unloved. You can see closer pictures of the gable ends. Now we'll talk about the actual gable end in a minute, when it was heavily bombed in World War II, and I will give you a sort of a brief description of what actually happened to the building. Again, you've got a close-up of the clock, and I'll go through where the clock went, the official one. But again, there's just lots of different images, things that I've colourised in 1896, showing the overhead railway, showing the actual splendour of the building itself. And you've just got so many different images of White Star Line, one of my favourites, 1924, and it shows the house flag, and it shows the White Star Line. It just really is a fantastic building. There's many images, A lot have been taken behind the actual overhead railway, but it shows the clock in situ. And again, there's just so much information on the building, and it's only when you look up close you can see different things that don't appear today. So originally there was a doorway to get out on the balcony, and these days that's a window. You can't actually get out onto the balcony at that point. It's purely a window. We've seen the clock close up, a fantastic one for me with the Gory at the centre, Gory Warehouse. And you've got the White Star Line, so you've got the American line, Dominion line, White Star Line, and you've got the second class and colonial passenger officers on the notice there. It's just a beautiful building, it really is. And Thomas Henry Ismay only enjoyed this until 1899. He only enjoyed it for a year because he sadly passed away, and his son Bruce Ismay took over. Again, next door to, so you can just see on the left hand side, 30 James Street. The building next to it was 24 to 28 James Street, and that was the Dominion Line headquarters. And after the takeover from the International Mercantile Marine Company, this was basically a collection of lines. So White Star Line, American Line, Dominican Line as well, and it was just a real part of the building that sort of ran really well. It was struck by lightning at one point. The White Star Line's offices at Liverpool were set on fire by lightning on Saturday. The picture shows the upper part of the building, from which the caretaker and his family were rescued with great difficulty. Now, when this happens, there was no external fire escape, and because the actual caretaker was living in the building, they put in the American style fire escape on the left hand side of the building. But again, lots of different images from White Star Line. Again, if you zoom in slightly, you have Moss motors, which were using this at one point. Various different items on the outside. I'll come into now the pre-war interior. Now this will give you one of the biggest things for me is people always talk about. Now, I was partly responsible a few years ago as being the previous owner's historical consultant for the building. So I would go down to the building and take VIP tours around the building. I've met with some fantastic people in the building, and I've done a lot of research on the building itself. And so one of the biggest things that people say to me at the start is the mosaic. Well, there's an image from 1896, and that's the vestibule of 30 James Street, and there's no mosaic. It's not original to the building. It was installed in 1934, and we'll come into that later. So when people say to you, oh, have you seen the mosaic, it's original to the building, it's not, it was a later addition. When you walked into the building, you've got the lifts on the left hand side, and you've got now, this is now the reception area through those double doors. There's no double doors there now, but you're through to the reception area. But originally, that would have been the start of the Grand Hall or the booking office. And you can see a close of the doors, White Star Line, Ismay, Imrie and Company. Those doors were sadly perished in the fire when the building was blitzed. But to get a real idea of what you're looking at, if you were to open the grand doors back then, you'd see this. And okay, this is taken halfway up the Grand Hall, but this was how the booking office looked in all its glory. I think it's a fantastic photograph. You can see the actual fireproof ceiling, and you can see the wooden panelling and how everything looked as well. Again, you can look around the Grand Hall, various paintings of different ships, and if you stand at the front and look back towards the doors, that's what you have. Just a real grand view of the Grand Hall. And if you were the first class passenger, that's what you'd see. If you were the second or steerage, you wouldn't get to see this at all, sadly, and it's a real shame. So again, lots of images. You've got a close-up of some of the actual desks and some of the workings, marble fireplaces. everything that you see apart from the actual plinths, which are here, survived. The whole building was blitzed in World War II and very little survived. So what we're going to do is we've taken you around the pre-war interior. Now the building has led a bit of a strange life. So when you look at it originally, it was originally for the White Star Line. Now the White Star Line, and again everyone knows the actual Titanic history, was designed by Richard Norman Shaw and James Francis Doyle. Now in my opinion, James Francis Doyle never gets a look in. He's one of my favourite architects. He's designed St Barnabas Church in Penny Lane, the former Royal Insurance Building in Liverpool on Dale Street, which is now the Loft Hotel. He partly helped out with 30 James Street. He designed the church in Bootle, St John St James. He designed the building Edsbury in West Derby, which I'm campaigning to save. And he's buried in Chilwell Church, which he also enlarged in 1906 and saved from near collapse. But James Francis Doyle, in my opinion, doesn't get a look in, doesn't get a mention. Now when you look at some of the old images for the former Royal Insurance Building, which he was the main architect for, it's a mirror image of, almost, of the entrance steps to 30 James Street. There's so many classic designs in the Royal Insurance Building that are so similar to 30 James Street itself. Now if I look at the actual building, so again we'll go to the pre-war interior, and you've got floor plans. So you would have the porch area, the hall, the two lifts, you have the staircase at the back, the general office, and you'll have private offices. We believe that the Ismay office was upstairs. There's always rumours about that Thomas Ismay had his private office on the right hand side. We think it would have been too close to the general public, so we believe that the office was upstairs. If you have a look at this picture, it gives an image of the staircase going up, and again we believe that the staircase, the stairs and the rail is different, and it was burnt out in the wall. When you look at the White Star Line at the present time, a lot of it is different because it's a different purpose. It's now currently working as a hotel, but there's lots of little images and little sort of letters that we've got with regards to the White Star Line. One of my favourite images is the Oceanic Steam Navigation Company. That was the White Star Line's name, Oceanic Steam. And you have letters from 30 James Street from Bruce Ismay. Dear Sir, I'm in receipt of your letter of the 22nd instant, and I have to advise you that it has been decided to install an a la carte restaurant on board the White Star Line steamers Olympic and Titanic, which are at present being built. I note your view that the only way in which such a restaurant can be kept up to date is by having it run by a large company such as the Savoy, and when we come to consider its organisation, I'll bear your suggestion in mind. And you can see from the top 30 James Street. Lots of letters I've got in the collection, lots of different items. Now, after the Titanic, and again I'm not going to go too much into the White Star Line, the White Star Line moved out of the building in 1934. However, as we all know, the bombing occurred in the Liverpool Blitz, and we had the Blitz taking place, and when you look at images of the White Star Line from the Blitz, it's incredible it actually survived. So to give you a rundown of the building itself, first of all, just to put your idea as to where you are, you have the ground, you walk into the ground floor and you have the ground floor office. You then go down a step or down a level and you go into the basement area, which was the original second class booking office. It has the strong room, which we'll come to later. Then you have the sub basement, which were all the workings, coal chutes, installation, boilers. You've then got floor 1 to 3, 4, 5 and 6. You've then got floor 7, which was the caretaker's attic space, which is now the restaurants, or at least was the restaurants during my time at the at 30 James Street. So what we're going to do now is 1934, White Star Line moved out, and the building was taken over by Pacific Steam Navigation Company, and they ran that building up until the building was bombed heavily in the war. Now, to give you an idea of just how bad the building was blitzed, when you look at the building previously and when you look at the building now, there are so many changes to the actual building that you see to this day. And it's not just simply a case of, well, this was done or that was done or the windows were taken out. The entire roofline structure is different and it's far more simplified. The metal dome tops either side of each turret have a different design. The complete front gable end has been removed and replaced with a far more simplistic design, and the external clock has been removed and destroyed. The doors either side of the turret, as we've spoken about, to walk on the balcony, were bricked up to window height. But to give you an idea of the bombing, that's how bad 30 James Street was left. Literally a shell, literally the metal roof line, the chimney stacks and the outer band of the clock. Again, this was an image taken from Sea Brow, and it's probably the best picture I've got showing the actual devastation of 30 James Street. Miraculously, you still got the entrance doors. Everything else was taken out completely. The roof was struck. Now, talking about the clock, in the war, as you can see, the clock, all that was left of the clock was the iron bands and the hands. The wooden supports had gone, the wooden casing had gone, the mechanism inside the turret had gone. And what had happened was, in between 1946 and 1949, when the building was restored, it was restored on the cheap. The Pacific Steam Navigation Company simply wanted to actually get this building back up and running, and they commissioned an architect to get the building back and running as quickly as possible. There was little money after the war and little material, and so the clock was taken down and it was taken away in skips along with the roof line and the gable end and destroyed. It's not in storage anywhere, it's not missing. The official verdict is the clock was taken down and destroyed along with the gable end and the roofline structure. It's not in a museum, it's not in someone's house, it's probably somewhere in landfill, and that's the official one. Again, when you look at the this picture, so it shows when workers started on the restoration, the complete gable end and the roof line has been taken out. So effectively what you've got now is, if you know the building or you've been in the building, this large entrance here is part of the presidential suite, and yet there are no windows on the presidential suite, no turrets, and again you've got the entrance above, so you've got the two small doorways. One was for the top and one was for the restaurants, the back of the restaurants. That's how badly the building was damaged. The gable end was just literally flapping in the wind almost and was taken down. You can see from the structure of the roof how badly all the actual steelwork has bowed, either by a bomb hitting it or either by the actual heat of the fire. But that is, you're now looking at the restaurants area, and it's just absolute devastation. And it was basically held together by the way it was built. It really, when you look at sort of James Street, again, it's just got empty windows, next door completely gone, and part of the area sort of tidied up as best possible. People just went on their way. Looking at the rear of James Street, again gives you an indication of everything was burnt out, everything was blitzed, it was just a shell. So between 1946 and 1949 the building was restored, and it was restored on the cheap. It was done to get the building back up and running. Again, you can see a side-on view. There's just absolutely nothing left. So when you look at the actual White Star Line in post-war, let's have a look at the post-war. So what you will see is you will see the post-war, if I've got a post-war image. So you have the gable end, which is completely different. You can see on recent photographs the difference in colour. You can see the letters, Pacific Steam Navigation Company. You've got different tops, and we'll go into the interior of the building just to show what it was like as well. Post-war interior is different. So if I was to go back to post-war interior, these show a variety of images. In fact, what I'll do is I'll go to these ones first of all. These were taken, I believe, in the 1970s, and it shows the building when it was more or less derelict. Everybody had moved out and there was a large sort of absence. And again, you've got 30 James Street standing by itself, unloved if you like. And what was sort of to me was the fact that there was so few people that had been in this building. I walked past it. I used to work in the Cunard building years ago, and I used to walk past this building every single day and wonder what's inside, what does it look like. And you'd see the iron gates shut. There was nothing at all done to the building. You can see on the left hand side the fire escape, and you can see the interior. So the interior now, you've lost your grand wooden doors, you've lost your offices. It's just a very basic shell, as little as possible, just to get the building back up and running if you like. And it's a shadow of its former self, former glory, because you've still got the original plinths. You can see on the bottom left hand side everything's been covered up, and it was just a shadow of its former self. It really was. You'd be hard pressed to sort of understand, well, what was that used to be there for. It's a really sort of different area. And again, this was just left empty for years. You've got a different roof design, which in my opinion isn't as pretty as the original one. And you've got the grand hall, and it just looks, when I say original windows, you've got original windows from the time, and a very sort of forlorn interior, and that's the grand hall. A lot of it was covered up. A lot of the actual structure was covered up completely, and there was very little to see of the originality. So if we go back into, let me have a look at post-war. So post-war interior, I'm going to just give you brief images of what I can show, because some from the collection may be copyrighted from the previous owner. So we look at the image of the turret rooms which were open. These turret rooms were completely open to the main floor. And we believe that one of the turret rooms was where Thomas Henry Ismay had his office and could look out onto the seafront. But that was the devastation caused. And again, when it was restored on the cheap, and you have sort of various newer ceilings, if you like, and just plugs and what have you getting around. Again, you've got open plan. And it was so difficult when the previous owner moved in and sort of recommissioned the building back in 2014. They found all sorts of, iron bands, iron beams. Originality was just fantastic. Again, if you were to look into the top floor, so the top floor, we're now in the restaurant area, and that was the caretaker's flat. And you can just see the difference if you've been into 30 James Street, what it looks like now. That was the caretaker's flat. Again here, this is now the presidential suite. So you have a door halfway through, and you have the full length of the room presidential suite, and you can see the turrets in the corners. Completely different to what it used to be, what it looked like originally to what it is now. Again, you've got the ground floor, which was all partly covered up, and you just see fantastic. You just see sort of snippets of fantastic, you know, ceilings or what have you, not been seen before. Again, the upper rooms completely different, and again you've got this one. It shows a wider view of the turret room. If you've ever stayed in a turret room, they are lovely. One of the beds isn't here. Really nice place. And again, this is how bad it was. It was about to go on the at-risk register for Historic England. So bad was the building. Now, I'm not going to talk about the previous owner because I've left their business and I don't want to go back into that sort of publicity area. But in my opinion, they saved the building, because if they've not utilised and restored the building back in 2014, I think the building would be on the at-risk register by now, possibly, if not worse. They saved the building, they restored the building, and there's been a lot of water under the bridge since they took on the building, and the building's now been sold to a new owner. But 2014, they get my vote purely because they saved the structure of the building and the restoration. So what I'm going to do now is give a brief rundown of the actual building itself at the present day. We have a look at the staircase. That's before the carpet was moved in and repainted. Again, you've got the basement area. I believe I can show these. So this was the original. So this is now Morgan Spa. If you've ever been down to Morgan Spa, that's the basement area, as it was derelict before 2014. They were some of the boilers, and the front of the boilers were cut off and placed in the restaurant area, just sort of a nod to the past. Again, you've got the basement area here, and that's looking at the back of the building. Just complete dereliction. So when anybody has a go at the previous owner, I have to turn around and say, well, I'm sorry, you know, they really looked after the building, they really restored the building to its former glory. Again, that's the turret room as it was, that's the plain staircase as it was. Complete difference to what is there now, or at least what I know is there now. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have a brief look at 30 James Street in the present day. Now, when I say the present day, these are images that I've taken during my time there for a couple of years. So we're talking pre-COVID. So again, the building, the interior might have changed, and again it will change from the new owners when they come in and renovate the building again. But I'm going to give you a floor by floor snippet of what is there now, some balcony views, the basement area, the corridors, and give you an idea of, if you've never been in, this is what 30 James Street looks like, or at least it did do in 2020. So again, you're walking up into the entrance chamber, and again it just so mirrors the former Royal Insurance building that Doyle designed himself. Again, if you were going up there, first class passenger booking office. One of the stones that everybody misses on the entrance chamber is this stone. People just don't see it at all. Closer view. Strike on the plate, not on the granite. Either this was to strike a match on the metal plate, or it was to knock out your pipe before you enter the building. So strike your pipe on the plate and not on the granite, and therefore don't break our building. Again, the entrance chamber, really nice to see. You've got various sort of flowers, you've got your sort of different items. It's just a really nice place. Now, again, when you come into the entrance chamber, you've got the mosaic. Now, that mosaic was installed in 1934 by the new owners, Pacific Steam Navigation Company, and that is South America. So whenever you walk up to the grand entrance and you see the mosaic, it's not 1896, it's 1934, installed by the Pacific Steam Navigation Company, who owned the building at the time. You've got your two lifts, and you've got an original letter drop. This was a chute that ran all the way up to all the floors, and you drop your post into here. I've never seen inside that door yet, maybe one day. So you've got your entrance chamber, really nice place to go into, and it leads into the ground floor. So what you would have originally was you would have these would have had the original doors, and this part would be the grand hall. This is now the reception area, so you have a private office on the top and you have the reception area behind. It's still just a fantastic area. You have war memorials from the Great War, which thankfully have been kept. You have another one next to the reception area as well. Just a really nice touch of originality there. Again, you can see the lifts, the mosaic. It's just been done so well. It really has, in my opinion. And again, you've got the lift area, and yes, you've got branding from the old former owners. Again, you've got a close-up of the mosaic, which is just amazing. It's survived. It really is such a nice touch to the building. You're looking down on the back of the grand hall. That's now a private office. And when you walk into the actual reception area, it's just grand. It's the best part of the building, in my opinion. It really is nice. The biggest surprise is that when you walk into the grand hall, these are photos that I've taken myself, and you can see the grand hall in its splendour. It really is nice. The only downside is that the previous company didn't save the marble plinths that were there originally. They were taken out and unfortunately scrapped, and that would have been a great asset to the actual originality of the grand hall. But it just is a beautiful area, beautiful location. I'd love to see what the new owners are going to do with the space. Hopefully there's going to be a real nod back to the White Star Line itself. Again, you've got the front windows, the White Star Line. It's just a classy place to be in. It really is a nice place to be in. And there's various designs. You've got the bar area, you've got a kitchen area here on the left hand side. But originally, when you're looking back, that would have been the full length of the grand hall. It's just a lovely place. I love every time that I throw the doors open into the grand hall. Such a nice area. The whole ground floor is really nice. Anyone can walk in and just have a look around. You don't have to be a person to book a room. You can actually, or at least you could just walk in. We're going to then go down into the basement area. So the basement area is split into two parts. When you go down the staircase, so this is the bottom of the staircase, or you can take the lifts. The lifts are further out through that doors. You've got what is now called Morgan's Vault. Now Morgan's Vault, there's your corridor, and Morgan's Vault is there's various basement rooms. But Morgan's Vault, as it was basically a party room, and it's had, I don't know how many beds there were. I think there were 20 sleepers or 28 sleepers. So basically it was a bit of a party room. And the idea was that this was originally part of, so you can see the strong room door in front of you, but this is basically, you could book the entire Morgan's Vault floor. I think there was 48 beds in total, and take over the floor for the night and take over the spa, which is below, as a private party. We'll come to that in a moment. But there's the strong room door, and this is Morgan's Vault. You've got an original strong safe on the left hand side, and again, if you go into Morgan's Vault in the strong room, you will see this. Now, originally it was a strong room. The former owners decided to put a spiral staircase through the roof, through the ceiling. Through the floor, which was the ceiling of Morgan's Spa. So you have a spiral staircase, you go down into the spa area, and it was your private viewing. I believe that's original either to the White Star Line or to Pacific Steam. And it's just when you look back out, you're inside the original strong room. Just a fantastic nod to the area. When you come back out onto the corridor, So you'll have Morgan's Vault on the left hand side. You come out and you've got Morgan's Spa, and you'll go through the door on the left hand side. Here is a bit of a strange place because it's sort of you're underneath the main floor area. So this is now, it's still the basement area going into the sub-basement area. And if you were to climb the steps on the left hand side, that would be the original second class passenger entrance. Again, on this side you've got various nods to the past of who designed various sort of known faces. Captain Smith, R. Norman Shaw. You've got the White Star Line newspaper, J. Bruce Ismay. And again, you'll go down into the steps and you'll go down into Morgan's Spa. Now, Morgan's Spa, do I have any photographs of Morgan's Spa? I do. So you'd walk into Morgan's Spa and it would look pretty much like this. If I go to the next one, there. So you'd come in from the bottom entrance and you'd have a hydrotherapy pool, you'd have shower rooms, steam rooms, and you'd have, this would be a private area if you wanted to be. So you'd come down the spiral staircase from Morgan's Vault into Morgan's Spa, and it was basically a sort of a nightclub for the night. Again, it was the one place I used to love going into because when you had a cold, it was so steamy. You'd walk in, I've got a cold now, as you can probably tell, so it was completely refreshed. And you didn't really take many photographs in there because obviously there were people walking around in their smalls, so you'd have to wait until everybody was out to try and get a secret photograph. That was one of the fun parts. Now, there's various parts of the building which, as you can sort of understand, are completely different. Now, you've got rumours. So when you go down into the basement area, sub-basement, before you actually go into the door of Morgan's Spa, come to this point. Now, what it shows, you have to put your camera through this sort of hatchway. I was standing there the first time I had a tour around the building, and someone, I think it was concierge, someone said to me, "There's a ladder up there, you ever been up?" So I put my head under and said, "No, never been up there, never really want to go up there, doesn't lead anywhere." And he said, "Well, actually, it led to an escape hatch, and it led to the Cunard building." And I thought he was joking, so I turned around and said, "Well, don't wish to alarm you, but the Cunard building was the opposition for the White Star Line. It was built after the White Star Line was built, and if you were to take out the ceiling, so we're now looking up, what you would actually find is a coal chute. So they've put a ladder there just for effect or to paint it or what have you at the time, but that was originally a coal chute. If you were to take the pavement house of the front of James Street, you'd find a coal hole, and that was the original coal chute. So it wasn't an escape hatch, unfortunately. Nice story, but it wasn't an escape hatch. We'll then go into the upper floors of James Street and just have a look around and just see what we've got. So again, there's a couple of stories. So when you go into, let me go back to this photograph, the best one I can show you. We'll go back to the builder. So you've got your balcony rooms, one on the right hand side above the main entrance, and you've got your balcony rooms here. Now the story goes is that obviously on the night of the Titanic there was a lot of confusion at first as to false reports, but various officers, Southampton, gave the names and read out information as soon as it was coming through. The biggest issue I've got is that there's no known information from the night of the Titanic regarding 30 James Street. There are no photographs, there's no report of what's happened to 30 James Street, there's no, well, because it was the headquarters, there was not, I've never come across a single image, information, anything at all about what happened on the night of the Titanic. People turned around and said, well, story goes is that they locked the main door and once they locked the main door, they read out names from the balcony, which was this above the main door. Who knows? It's never been proven. So it's a great story, but it's not one that I can actually say, cast iron evidence, it actually happened. So when you go up to, so what I'll do is, you've got the floors. So when you go from the ground floor to the first floor, they were given names, and I'm going to test myself now. I think it was Titanic, Oceanic, Olympic, Fortune, London, and New York. They were the levels, they were the floors, the names. Don't quote me. But I did take some images from the balcony areas. So you can see that's the balcony view of the flagpole. There should always be the White Star Line flag on that pole. There never is. And I only wish, if the new owners can somehow give a nod to the past, they would have a White Star Line flag flying from there, and they would have something for the evening of the Titanic disaster. I think it would be a really nice nod to have something just to, something, whether it was a nice dinner or something just to congregate the building, who knows. Various balcony shots looking onto the Strand. Various windows. Let me just have a look. So it's a hotel room. You can open the doors and stand out as a stud house. Really nice place to be. You get a really nice view. You can see how old the photo is because the Man Island has been bricked up again. No comments. So you've got lots of balcony views, and again you've got sort of different places. That's from the top of the building. One of my favourite views, so that is looking at the actual balcony, and that used to be a door there, but it's now, you can probably get access to it if you open the window, but I didn't really want to chance my arm getting out onto that balcony. But maybe one day it would be a fantastic view. So there's some of your balcony views, and I just think if you get a room, book a room with a balcony view, you really can throw open the doors and stand out if you wish to be. What I liked about the corridors was that when the previous owner designed the building's interior, they designed it as if you were on a ship. That's the way I can describe it. So the floors 1 and 2 were very dark, and as you moved up you had a lighter and different style. Now unfortunately they took out the padding for floors 1 and 2, but I managed to have a photographer took, and it looked like that. The corridors have got no natural light, so when you first open the doors, the first thing that hits you is complete darkness. Second thing that hits you is the actual silence, because it just deadens the silence completely. And that was the actual view of the corridor for floors 1 and floors 2. It's not like that now, unfortunately. I love that design. Some people had alternative sort of views on what it looked like. I loved this. Further up in the building you had different designs, so it's a far brighter design with sort of different pipework visible, and again you've got nooks and crannies based on the original layout of the building. I'd love to see what the new design is going to be. Again you've got different areas, fire doors as well. One of the funny stories I've heard, and this was, I went back in James Street a couple of years back, and that's how it looks now. That's heading towards the presidential suite. One of the stories I heard when I was there was a resident ghost, and the resident ghost used to knock on doors in floor 1 at various times when the building was empty, or that particular floor was empty. And all I can say to that is the fact that these corridors aren't original. All of the floors were originally open plan. So if a ghost is knocking on a certain door, he's learned how to find that door, because that door wasn't original and the corridor wasn't original. So I've heard many ghost stories at James Street. I've seen nothing myself, but that's the official it was open plan. Looking down from the top of the staircase, right to the bottom, and the staircase balustrade was raised at some points, just to go, because the original handrail is quite low. When you're walking up and down the stairs, you do feel a little bit, that's a bit low, and it even sort of, I always stand on the far left hand side walking up. But that is your sort of your general view of again, you've got the staircase and a place to sit. If you've ever climbed the stairs, I've climbed the stairs once and regretted it. So yes, again, that's your corridor areas. We've been to the ground floor. We can have a look in the presidential suite. So the presidential suite, that was the view out of the window, and the presidential suite is the grandest of them all. So behind me, I will show you what you have. So that's the turrets, the roof of the turrets. In the presidential suite, you've got on one side, which is the seating area, and on the other side, which is the bath. That is originally half of the original water tank that was in the attic room, or the attic, for 30 James Street. That was the rainwater collection to use for your ablutions and what have you. That was half taken out and repurposed, and that is now in the presidential suite. So if you're ever lucky enough to go into the presidential suite, that's what you've got. Presidential suite is just a lovely place. Again, you've got different rooms. I've not purposely done a walk around on the different rooms because of copyright. I have taken images into the restaurant as it was. So originally these doors were installed for the restaurant. Lamport and Holt line used to work in the building. And you've got fantastic views outside, unchanged. You've got a close-up of the chimney stacks, the original chimney stacks, which are just really beautiful. You have, again, looking up James Street into town, Roman Catholic Cathedral, Radio City Tower. Really, really nice view. Really nice view on a summer's day. And you've got, when you think back to the old caretaker's image, that is now the, or at least it was back in 2020, the Carpathia restaurants. And there are the fronts of the boilers that were in the basement area as well. Just a really nice place to be. Again, what I used to love in the building was the lifts only went up as far as the presidential suite, and to get to Carpathia, which was obviously the actual private quarters of the caretaker, there were these stairs. So I always took the lift to the top floor and then walked up these stairs or walked down these stairs, because these stairs were never used. It was sort of a, yes, it was sort of a, not a fire exit as such, but no one ever used these stairs, and I always used them. People say, oh, what's down there? I used to take people down and take people around. I once took a group of school children around the building, and we took them up in groups of 6 to Carpathia. They had a bite to eat, and then I took them around the presidential suite, and then took them down the staircase. And I didn't want to bust them all down 6 at a time, so we all used the staircase. And one of the concierge members had never walked down the staircase before, and he was quite, oh, I didn't know that was where it led to, type of thing. So that's 30 James Street in a bit of a nutshell. I had the privilege of working for that building within other buildings from the previous owner. I've designed various documents and various scripts from the past of information. I've done a booklet on the White Star Line and the building, which is here. I'll just let that load up. And so I've designed a sort of a write-up of, which I can always put a link into that. It gives the White Star Line, it gives a brief overview of the images, the right above 1896, 1898, Richard Norman Shaw, and again it goes through the different images on the White Star Line. It gives the plan, the original foyer, and I'm just going through just to see if there's anything I've missed. You've got the war years, so that was the dome that was blitzed completely. We've seen this one, we've seen those images. That's been colorized by me. So again, the clock has gone. It's not missing, it's completely gone. Signs of the building, post-war era, Pacific Steam Navigation Company, overhead railway. Again, you've got the Pacific Steam Navigation logo, 1960s. The interior, the Grand Hall, and how the building was almost left to rot. You can see the original lines: Bermuda, Bahamas, Cuba, Ecuador, Colombia, Peru and Chile. Fire access, the original owners, the basement area, you've seen the basement area, and you've got various restoration images of the Grand Hall. And the previous owner, I'm not going to name them, the previous owner again did a sterling job. They uncovered all the original beams and just restored the building. We've seen these interior, turret quarters, presidential suite, turret quarters, Carpathia, turret room. That's the original staircase into the top floor of the attic area. Again, you've got your second class and steerage. Then and Now of Man Island. Entrance, strike on the place, the mosaic, the lifts, reception area, Grand Hall, basements, sub-basements, Morgan's Vaults, strong room, Morgan's Spa, first and second floor corridors, the lighter area, staircase, the views, the turret rooms, presidential suite, original staircase steps, Carpathia, and the views. And again, you've got the White Star Line items. So that is a brief on 30 James Street. I hope it's been informative. I've gone through as much as I can. I'm hoping that the new owners will give a nod to the originality of the building, and I hope that in some way I can be involved together with my good friend Cliff Ismay, and we see a new sort of design for White Star Line, and we can go in and look around once again. Thanks all.